The whip cracked through the air, and Sarah stepped forward. She did not know why she did it. The man kneeling in the dirt was a stranger, just another traveler passing through the village on his way to somewhere better. He had been caught stealing bread from the baker's stall, and the punishment for theft was 20 lashes. Everyone knew the rules. Everyone knew to keep their heads down and their mouths shut when the village enforcers carried out justice. But Sarah had seen his hands shaking when they forced him to his knees. She had seen the way his threadbare cloak hung off shoulders that were too thin, the way his ribs showed through his torn shirt. He was starving, desperate, and the enforcers did not care. They never cared. "Wait!" The word left her mouth before she could stop it. "Please, let me take his punishment instead." The crowd went silent. The head enforcer, a brutal man named Graves who had made Sarah's life miserable since she was old enough to walk, turned to stare at her with cold amusement. "What did you say, girl?" Sarah's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to take it back, to disappear into the crowd and pretend she had never spoken. But she looked at the stranger kneeling in the dirt, and something in his dark eyes made her stand her ground. "I said let me take his punishment." Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to keep speaking. "He stole because he was hungry. That is not a crime worthy of 20 lashes. But if someone must be punished, let it be me." Graves laughed. It was an ugly sound, full of cruelty and anticipation. "You want to take 20 lashes for a man you have never met? A stranger who means nothing to you?" "Yes." The word hung in the air between them. Sarah saw her own death in Graves's eyes. He had been looking for an excuse to hurt her for years, ever since she had refused his advances when she turned 16. Now she had handed him one on a silver platter. "Very well." Graves smiled, showing too many teeth. "Tie her to the post." Rough hands grabbed Sarah's arms and dragged her forward. She did not fight. She kept her eyes fixed on the stranger as they bound her wrists to the wooden post, as they tore the back of her dress to expose her skin to the cold morning air. He was staring at her with an expression she could not read. Shock, maybe, or disbelief, as if no one had ever shown him kindness before. The first lash stole her breath. Pain exploded across her back like liquid fire. She bit down on her lip to keep from screaming, tasting blood as the second lash fell. Then the third, the fourth, each one worse than the last, tearing through her skin, sending agony rippling through every nerve in her body. By the 10th lash, she could no longer hold back her cries. By the 15th, darkness crept at the edges of her vision. She was going to die here. She knew it with sudden, terrible clarity. Graves was not going to stop at 20. He was going to keep going until there was nothing left of her. "Enough." The voice was quiet, but it carried across the square like thunder. The whip stopped mid-swing. Sarah hung limply from her bonds, barely conscious, blood running down her back in hot rivers. Through the haze of pain, she saw the stranger rise to his feet. The chains that had bound his wrists lay broken on the ground. His threadbare cloak fell away, revealing armor beneath. Not just any armor. Royal armor, emblazoned with the crest of the Alpha King. The crowd gasped. Several people dropped to their knees. The stranger walked toward her, and with every step, he seemed to grow larger, more powerful, more terrifying. When he reached the post where she hung, he cupped her face in his hands and tilted her chin up to meet his gaze. His eyes were not dark, she realized dimly. They were gold, bright, burning gold, the eyes of an alpha in his full power. "You took a punishment meant for me," he said softly. "Why?" Sarah's lips moved, but no sound came out. The world was spinning, fading. The last thing she heard before the darkness claimed her was the Alpha King's voice, cold with fury. "Seize the enforcer. He will answer for every mark on her body." Sarah woke to the smell of herbs and wood smoke. She was lying on her stomach, her cheek pressed against silk sheets softer than anything she had ever felt. Warmth surrounded her, chasing away the chill that had seeped into her bones during those terrible moments at the whipping post. For a long, blissful moment, she simply lay there and breathed, too comfortable to move, too drowsy to think. Then the pain came rushing back. Her back felt like it had been flayed open and set on fire. Every breath sent fresh waves of agony rippling through her body. She tried to push herself up, but her arms gave out beneath her, and she collapsed back onto the sheets with a whimper. "Do not move." A deep voice came from somewhere nearby. "The healer said you need to rest. Your wounds are still fresh." Sarah turned her head, searching for the source of the voice, and her breath caught in her throat. The stranger sat in a chair beside her bed. Only he was not a stranger anymore. He had washed and changed into clothes that screamed wealth and power. A deep blue tunic embroidered with silver thread, leather boots polished to a shine. His dark hair had been combed back from his face, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could have been carved from marble. But it was his eyes that made her heart stutter. Gold, bright and burning, fixed on her face with an intensity that made her want to shrink into the mattress. "You are awake," he said. His voice was carefully neutral, but something flickered beneath the surface, something that looked almost like relief. "How do you feel?" "Like I was whipped," Sarah croaked. Her throat was raw from screaming. "Where am I? What happened? Where is Graves?" "You are in the royal traveling quarters. My caravan was camped outside your village when I decided to explore on foot." His jaw tightened. A foolish decision in retrospect. As for the enforcer, he is currently in chains awaiting transport to the capital. He will stand trial for his crimes. Sarah stared at him. The words made sense individually, but strung together they seemed like nonsense. Royal traveling quarters. Trial for his crimes. This could not be real. She was dreaming, or delirious from pain, or dying and hallucinating her way into the afterlife. "You are the king," she whispered. "I am." He inclined his head. "King Kalen of the Northern Realm, Alpha of Alphas, ruler of the 7 Packs." A ghost of a smile crossed his face, there and gone in an instant. "Though when you found me, I was simply a hungry traveler caught stealing bread." The memory hit her like a punch to the chest. She had taken 20 lashes for the Alpha King. She had screamed and bled and nearly died for the most powerful man in the realm, a man who could have broken those chains at any moment, a man who had not needed her help at all. "You let me do it." The words came out sharper than she intended. Anger flared in her chest, hot and sudden, cutting through the fog of pain. "You could have stopped it. You could have revealed yourself before they ever touched me. But you sat there and watched them tear my back apart." Something shifted in Kalen's golden eyes. Guilt, maybe, or shame. He leaned forward in his chair, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped together. "I wanted to see what your people would do," he said quietly. "I have received reports of corruption in the outer villages, enforcers abusing their power, lords taxing their citizens into starvation. I came here in disguise to witness the truth for myself." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. "I did not expect anyone to stand up for me. I did not expect you." Sarah did not know what to say to that. She turned her face away from him, staring at the silk hangings that draped the walls of the tent. Everything was too much. The pain, the opulence, the king sitting at her bedside as if she mattered, as if she was not just a poor village girl who had made a stupid, impulsive decision. "I should not have done it," she murmured. "I do not even know why I did. You were a stranger. I owed you nothing." "And yet you stepped forward anyway." Kalen's voice was soft now, almost gentle. "You offered your body, your blood, your life for someone you had never met. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious?" Something warm bloomed in Sarah's chest, and she hated it. She did not want to feel warm toward him. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to blame him for her pain, for the scars she would carry for the rest of her life. But when she turned back to look at him, the raw sincerity in his golden eyes made her anger falter. "You owe me a debt," he said. "A life debt, by the old laws. You saved me from suffering, even if I did not truly need saving. That means something in my kingdom." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against her skin. "Come with me to the capital. Let my healers tend your wounds properly. Let me repay what you have given." Sarah's heart raced. The capital, the palace, a world so far removed from her village that it might as well be another realm entirely. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Kalen's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Then I will stay here until you change your mind. I am told I can be very persistent." She should have refused. She should have sent him away and gone back to her miserable life in the village, where at least she understood the rules. But something in his golden eyes held her captive. Something that whispered of fate and destiny and a future she had never dared to imagine. "Fine," she whispered. "I will go with you." The king's smile widened, and for just a moment he looked almost boyish, almost soft. Sarah had no idea what she had just agreed to. The journey to the capital took 5 days. 5 days of riding in a covered carriage padded with cushions and furs. 5 days of healers tending her wounds morning and night, applying salves that smelled of lavender and mint, changing the bandages that wrapped around her torso like armor. 5 days of meals served on silver platters, rich foods she had never tasted before, meats and cheeses and pastries that melted on her tongue. It was more luxury than Sarah had experienced in her entire life combined. And through it all, the king never left her side. Kalen rode beside the carriage during the day, visible through the small window whenever Sarah turned her head. At night, he joined her for dinner in her tent, sitting across from her at a small table while servants bustled around them. He asked her questions about her life, her village, her family. He listened to her answers with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, as if every word she spoke was precious and worth remembering. She did not understand him. He was a king, the most powerful alpha in all the realm, and yet he treated her like an equal, like a friend, like someone who mattered. On the third night, Sarah finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she woke in his tent. "Why were you really in that village?" Kalen looked up from his plate. The candlelight caught his golden eyes, making them flicker like flames. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. "I told you, I was investigating reports of corruption." "That is not the whole truth." Sarah held his gaze, refusing to look away. "A king does not travel alone in disguise, stealing bread from market stalls. There is something else. Something you are not telling me." A muscle ticked in his jaw. She watched him wage some internal battle, his expression shifting through emotions too quickly to name. Finally, he let out a slow breath. "I was running away," he said quietly. Sarah blinked. Running away from what? From everything. He pushed back from the table and stood, crossing to the tent's entrance to stare out at the darkness beyond. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched at his sides. "The council has been pressuring me to take a mate. They have parades of noble daughters through my court every month, each one more ambitious than the last. They smile and simper and tell me what they think I want to hear, and none of them see me at all. They see the crown, the power, the title." His voice turned bitter. "I wanted to remember what it felt like to be nobody, to walk among my people without the weight of expectation crushing me." Sarah's heart clenched with unexpected sympathy. She had spent her whole life invisible, overlooked, dismissed. She had never considered that someone might choose invisibility. that the weight of being seen could be just as heavy as the weight of being ignored. "That sounds lonely," she said softly. Kalen turned to look at her. Something in his expression cracked open, revealing a vulnerability she had not expected to see. "It is," he admitted. "It is the loneliest thing in the world, being surrounded by people who only want what you can give them." Sarah rose from her chair, ignoring the pull of pain across her healing back, and crossed the tent to stand beside him. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of pine and distant wood smoke. She did not touch him. She did not know if she was allowed, but she stood close enough that he could feel her presence, close enough that he would know he was not alone. "I did not know who you were when I stepped forward," she said. "I did not see a king. I saw a man who was hungry and frightened and about to be hurt for no good reason." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Maybe that is the kind of person you need in your life, someone who sees you, not your crown." Kalen stared at her. The gold of his eyes seemed to darken, swirling with emotions she could not name. He lifted his hand, slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm and gentle. "You are extraordinary," he murmured. "Do you know that? Everyone in that village watched me kneel in the dirt, and not one of them moved. But you did. You barely knew your own worth, and yet you threw yourself between a stranger and a whip without hesitation." Heat crept up Sarah's neck. She was not used to compliments. She was not used to anyone looking at her the way Kalen was looking at her now, like she was something precious and rare. "I am not extraordinary," she whispered. "I am just a village girl who made a foolish decision." "You are wrong." His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone, feather-light. "And I intend to spend as long as it takes to make you see that." Sarah's breath caught. The air between them felt charged, electric, heavy with something she did not dare name. Her wolf, quiet for so long she had almost forgotten it existed, stirred restlessly in her chest. It wanted something. It wanted him. Before she could do something reckless, the sound of hoofbeats broke through the night. Kalen's hand dropped from her face. His expression shifted in an instant, the softness vanishing behind a mask of authority. A guard appeared at the tent's entrance, breathing hard from his ride. "Your Majesty," the guard said urgently. "A message from the capital. The council has called an emergency session. They say it cannot wait." Kalen's jaw tightened. He glanced at Sarah, and for just a moment, she saw regret flicker in his golden eyes. "We leave at first light," he said. "Tell the drivers to prepare for a faster pace." The guard bowed and disappeared into the night. Sarah stood alone in the doorway of the tent, her heart still racing, her cheek still warm where his fingers had touched her. Something had shifted between them tonight, something fragile and new, and she had no idea whether that was a blessing or a curse. The capital took Sarah's breath away. She had heard stories about the city her whole life, whispered tales of towering spires and cobblestone streets and markets that stretched for miles. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of it. The palace alone was larger than her entire village, a fortress of white stone and glittering windows that seemed to touch the clouds. Guards in polished armor lined the entrance, and servants in fine livery rushed to attend the king's carriage the moment it passed through the gates. Sarah felt like a stain on a silk dress. She was given chambers in the guest wing, rooms larger than any house she had ever entered. A massive bed draped in velvet, a bathing tub carved from marble, windows that overlooked gardens bursting with flowers she could not name. She stood in the center of it all and felt the weight of how much she did not belong pressing down on her chest. That first night, a servant brought her a gown to wear to dinner. It was deep green silk, embroidered with silver leaves, more beautiful than anything Sarah had ever touched. She put it on with trembling hands and stared at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman who looked back at her. Kalen came to escort her personally. He stopped in the doorway of her chambers, his golden eyes sweeping over her, and for a moment he simply stared. Something flickered across his face. Hunger, maybe, or wonder. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "You look beautiful." Sarah's cheeks burned. "I look like I am playing dress up in someone else's clothes." "You look like you belong here." He crossed the room and offered her his arm. "Come, I want to show you something before dinner." He led her through the palace corridors, past tapestries and paintings and suits of armor that had probably cost more than her village's entire annual harvest. They climbed a narrow staircase, winding up and up until Sarah's legs ached and her healing back protested with each step. Finally, they emerged onto a balcony at the top of the highest tower. The view stole what little breath she had left. The entire kingdom spread out below them, bathed in the golden light of sunset. Rolling hills and dense forests and rivers that gleamed like ribbons of silver. In the distance, she could see mountains capped with snow, their peaks turned pink and orange by the fading sun. "This is where I come when everything becomes too much," Kalen said quietly. He stood beside her at the railing, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "When the council demands too much, when the loneliness gets too heavy, I come up here and remind myself what I am fighting for." Sarah looked at him, at the way the sunset painted his sharp features in shades of gold. "What are you fighting for?" "My people." He paused, and something darker crossed his expression. "My father was not a good king. He was cruel and paranoid. He saw threats everywhere, even in his own family." His jaw tightened. "My mother tried to protect me from the worst of it, but she died when I was 12. After that, there was no one to stand between us." Sarah's heart clenched. She knew that kind of childhood, the kind where you learn to make yourself small, to avoid notice, to survive by staying invisible. "What happened to him?" she asked softly. "He died 5 years ago. A hunting accident, or so the official story goes." Kalen's voice was flat, empty of emotion. "The truth is that his own guards let him die. They saw him fall from his horse and they stood there watching until it was too late. He turned to look at her, and his golden eyes were haunted. I became king that day, and I swore I would be different. I would be the ruler my people deserved, not the monster my father was." Sarah reached out and took his hand. The gesture was instinctive, a need to comfort him the way no one had comforted her when she was young and scared and alone. His fingers were warm as they curled around hers. "You are not your father," she said firmly. "I have seen the way your people look at you. They respect you. They trust you. A monster does not inspire that kind of loyalty." "Sometimes I wonder." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Sometimes I feel his cruelty in me, waiting to come out, and I am terrified of what I might become." "Then do not become it." Sarah stepped closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You get to choose who you are, Kalen. Every single day, you get to choose. And from what I have seen, you keep choosing to be good." He stared at her for a long moment, something raw and vulnerable in his expression. Then he lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Stay," he murmured against her skin. "Not as a guest, not as a debt to be repaid. Stay because I cannot imagine this palace without you in it." Sarah's heart stuttered. She should have said no. She was a village girl with nothing to offer a king. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out entirely. "I will stay." Kalen smiled, slow and warm, and Sarah felt something click into place inside her chest. Something that felt terrifyingly like fate. She had no way of knowing that someone was watching them from the shadows below, someone whose plans for the king did not include a scarred village girl with no title and no name, and that someone was already planning how to destroy her. 2 weeks passed in a blur of wonder and warmth. Sarah spent her days exploring the palace, marveling at libraries filled with more books than she had known existed, wandering through gardens that seemed to bloom in every color imaginable. The servants treated her with cautious politeness, unsure what to make of the village girl who had somehow captured their king's attention. She ignored their whispers and focused instead on the small joys she had never been allowed before. Hot baths whenever she wanted them, meals that filled her stomach completely, clothes that did not have holes or patches, and Kalen. Always Kalen. He found her every evening without fail, stealing her away from whatever corner of the palace she had discovered to walk with her through the corridors or sit with her in the tower. He told her stories about his childhood, about the mischief he had caused before his mother died. He asked her about her dreams, her fears, her hopes for the future. He looked at her like she was the most fascinating person he had ever met. And slowly, despite her best efforts, Sarah felt herself falling. She had never been in love before. She had never allowed herself to even consider it. Love was a luxury for people with full bellies and safe homes, not for girls who scraped by on scraps and prayed to survive another winter. But when Kalen smiled at her, when his golden eyes softened and his hand reached for hers, she felt something crack open inside her chest. Something terrifying and beautiful and completely beyond her control. On the 15th night, he took her to the ballroom. It was empty at this hour, the chandeliers dark, the marble floor gleaming in the moonlight that streamed through the tall windows. Kalen led her to the center of the room and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I never learned to dance," Sarah admitted, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Village girls do not have much use for ballrooms." "Then I will teach you." He placed one hand on her waist and took her hand with the other, drawing her close. "It is simple. Just follow my lead." He began to move, guiding her through slow, sweeping steps that echoed softly in the empty room. Sarah stumbled at first, stepping on his feet, apologizing with breathless laughter. But gradually she found the rhythm, her body learning to anticipate his movements, her feet gliding across the floor as if they had done this 1,000 times before. "You are a natural," Kalen murmured, his breath warm against her temple. "You are a patient teacher." She looked up at him, and her heart stuttered at the expression on his face. He was not smiling anymore. He was looking at her with an intensity that made her blood run hot, his golden eyes dark with something she was afraid to name. Sarah. Her name was a whisper on his lips. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" He stopped dancing. His hand tightened on her waist, pulling her closer until there was barely any space between them. She could feel the heat of his body through the thin silk of her gown, could hear the rapid beat of his heart echoing her own. "The council has been demanding that I choose a mate," he said quietly. "They have presented me with dozens of candidates. Daughters of nobles, princesses from allied kingdoms, women with power and connections and everything a king should want." His thumb traced circles on her hip, sending shivers down her spine. "I have refused them all." Sarah's breath caught. "Why?" "Because none of them are you." He lifted his hand from her waist and cupped her face, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. "From the moment you stepped forward to take my punishment, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Your courage, your kindness, the way you see me, truly see me, when everyone else only sees the crown." His voice dropped to a rough whisper. "I am falling in love with you, Sarah. I think I have been since the beginning." Tears pricked at her eyes. She had spent her whole life believing she was worthless, invisible, undeserving of love. And here was a king, the most powerful man in the realm, telling her she was the only one he wanted. "I am nobody," she whispered. "I have nothing to offer you." "You are everything." His forehead pressed against hers. "And I do not care about what you can offer. I only care about you." He kissed her. His lips were warm and soft, gentle at first, almost hesitant. But when Sarah's hands fisted in the front of his tunic and pulled him closer, the gentleness gave way to hunger. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like he had been waiting his entire life for this moment. Her wolf surged to life in her chest, howling with triumph, with joy, with a fierce and primal recognition. Mate. The word echoed through her bones. He was her mate. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kalen rested his forehead against hers and smiled. "Say you feel it too," he murmured. "Tell me I am not imagining this." "You are not imagining it." Sarah's voice trembled with emotion. "I feel it. I feel everything." He kissed her again, and the world fell away. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows of the balcony above. Neither of them saw the hatred that twisted Lady Marin's beautiful face as she watched her carefully laid plans crumble to dust. But they would. Soon enough, they would. The trouble began 3 days later. Sarah woke to whispers. They followed her through the corridors, hushed voices that fell silent whenever she turned to look. Servants who had been polite now refused to meet her eyes. Guards who had nodded in greeting now stared through her as if she did not exist. Something had changed overnight, and she had no idea what. She found out at breakfast. The great hall was filled with nobles when she entered. Dozens of lords and ladies gathered around long tables laden with food. Sarah hesitated in the doorway, searching for Kalen, but he was nowhere to be seen. Instead, her gaze landed on a woman seated at the head table, directly in the king's empty chair. Lady Marin was stunning. Dark hair swept up in an elaborate arrangement of braids and jewels, porcelain skin and full red lips curved in a smile that did not reach her ice-blue eyes. She wore a gown of midnight velvet that clung to her curves, and around her throat hung a pendant bearing the royal crest. She looked like a queen. She looked like she belonged there. "Ah, the village girl," Lady Marin's voice carried across the hall, silencing every conversation. "How kind of you to join us. I was just telling everyone about your fascinating history." Sarah's stomach dropped. She stood frozen as every eye in the room turned toward her, as whispers erupted from every corner. "I am not sure what you mean, my lady," Sarah said carefully. "Oh, there is no need to be modest." Lady Marin rose from her chair and glided down the length of the hall, her skirts rustling against the stone floor. She stopped directly in front of Sarah, close enough that only the two of them could hear her next words. "I know everything, little mouse. I know about your mother, the whore who sold herself to anyone with a coin. I know about your father, the criminal who was executed for murder when you were barely old enough to walk." Her smile widened. "I know that the blood running through your veins is poison." Sarah's world tilted. Her mother had abandoned her. She had never known anything about her father, had never wanted to know. But Lady Marin spoke with such confidence, such certainty, that doubt crept into her heart like frost. "You are lying," she whispered. "Am I?" Lady Marin raised her voice, addressing the crowd once more. "Lords and ladies of the court, I present to you the woman who has bewitched our king, the daughter of a murderer and a whore, a creature so low she is not fit to scrub our floors, let alone share our king's bed." Gasps rippled through the hall. Sarah felt the weight of their judgment crushing her, felt the fragile sense of belonging she had built over the past weeks crumbling to dust. "That is enough." Kalen's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He strode into the hall with fury blazing in his golden eyes, his guards flanking him on either side. The crowd parted before him, nobles shrinking back from the raw power radiating from their king. "Lady Marin." His voice was deadly calm. "You will apologize to my guest." "Your guest?" Lady Marin laughed, high and brittle. "Is that what we are calling her now? Your Majesty, I am trying to protect you. This woman is beneath you in every possible way. Her bloodline is tainted, her origins are shameful, and she has no business standing in these halls." "Her bloodline means nothing to me." Kaelin stopped beside Sarah and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Her origins do not define her, and she has more right to stand in these halls than you ever will. Lady Marin's composure cracked. Rage flashed across her face, ugly and raw, before she smoothed it away behind a mask of wounded dignity. "The council will hear of this," she hissed. "They will never accept a peasant as their queen. They will never allow you to throw away everything your bloodline represents for some scarred village girl who spread her legs for—" "Finish that sentence," Kaelin interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "And I will have your tongue removed." The hall went deathly silent. Lady Marin stared at him, her face pale with shock. Then she gathered her skirts, sketched a mocking curtsy, and swept from the hall with her head held high. Sarah stood trembling at Kaelin's side, her hand still gripped in his. She could feel the stares of the nobles boring into her back, could hear the whispers already starting again. Whatever Lady Marin had done, it had worked. The court would never see her as anything but a stain on their king's honor. "Come with me," Kaelin murmured. "We need to talk." He led her from the hall, and Sarah followed in a daze. Her heart was racing, her thoughts scattered. She had known she did not belong here. She had known it from the very first moment she set foot in the palace. But she had never expected it to hurt this much. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a terrible fear was taking root. Maybe Lady Marin was right. Maybe she was poison. Maybe the kindest thing she could do was leave before she destroyed everything Kaelin had worked so hard to build. Kaelin tried to reassure her. He took her to his private study, away from the prying eyes and poisonous whispers, and held her while she trembled. He told her that Lady Marin was a bitter woman who had expected to be queen since childhood, that her claims were almost certainly lies designed to drive them apart. He told her that he did not care about her parents, whoever they were, that she was not defined by the sins of those who came before her. Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted to sink into his arms and let his words wash away the shame that clung to her skin. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the nobles in the great hall. The disgust, the contempt, the certainty that she was exactly what Lady Marin had called her. "The council will never accept me," she whispered against his chest. "Your people will never accept me. They will learn to." His arms tightened around her. "I am their king. My word is law." "And what happens when your word tears your kingdom apart?" Sarah pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I have seen the way Lady Marin looks at you. She is not going to stop, Kaelin. She will keep digging, keep spreading poison, keep turning your court against you until there is nothing left. And it will be my fault. It will be her fault, not yours, never yours." But Sarah could see the strain in his golden eyes, the weight of a choice no king should have to make. His heart or his crown, his mate or his kingdom. She could not let him make that choice. That night, after Kaelin had reluctantly returned to his duties, Sarah made her decision. She waited until the palace had fallen silent, until the corridors were empty and the guards had changed shifts. Then she gathered the few belongings she had brought with her, left the beautiful gowns hanging in the wardrobe, and slipped out of her chambers like a ghost. The servants' passages were dark and narrow, but Sarah had learned them well during her weeks in the palace. She moved quickly, keeping her head down, her heart breaking with every step. She did not allow herself to think about what she was leaving behind. If she thought about it, she would falter. If she faltered, she would stay, and staying would destroy them both. She made it as far as the stables before a voice stopped her cold. "Running away in the night like a thief." Lady Marin emerged from the shadows, her ice-blue eyes glittering with triumph. "How fitting for someone of your breeding." Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. "I am leaving. Is that not what you wanted?" It is exactly what I wanted. Lady Marin stepped closer, her smile sharp as a blade. But I am afraid I cannot let you simply disappear. You see, the king is rather attached to you. If you vanish without a trace, he will tear the kingdom apart, searching for you. She tilted her head, studying Sarah like a cat studying a mouse. No, we need something more permanent, something that will make him forget you ever existed. Fear crept up Sarah's spine. What are you talking about? Lady Marin raised her hand, and guards stepped out of the darkness on either side. Not palace guards. These men wore no insignia, bore no marks of loyalty to the crown. Mercenaries, Sarah realized with dawning horror. Hired killers. It is quite simple, really, Lady Marin said pleasantly. You were caught trying to steal from the royal treasury. When the guards confronted you, you attacked them. They had no choice but to defend themselves. She shrugged, a delicate gesture that made Sarah's blood run cold. A tragic end for the king's little pet. But he will recover. In time, he will see that I was right all along. And then he will choose a proper queen, one who deserves to stand at his side. You are insane. Sarah backed away, but the mercenaries closed in around her. Kalen will never believe I tried to steal from him. He will believe what the evidence tells him. Lady Marin's smile widened. And the evidence will be very convincing. Sarah fought. She kicked and clawed and bit, using every dirty trick she had learned growing up in a village where survival meant fighting for every scrap. But there were too many of them, and they were too strong. A blow to the side of her head sent her sprawling to the stable floor. Stars exploded across her vision. She tasted blood on her tongue. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her was Lady Marin standing over her, triumph written across her beautiful face. Sweet dreams, little mouse. When you wake, you will be facing execution for treason against the crown. Sarah's eyes fluttered closed, and the world went black. And miles away, in the palace above, Kalen woke from a sound sleep with his mate Bond screaming in agony. Kalen had never moved so fast in his life. He tore through the palace corridors in nothing but his sleeping clothes, his bare feet pounding against the cold stone. The bond burned in his chest like a wound, pulsing with fear and pain and something that felt horribly like goodbye. Sarah was in danger. Sarah was hurt. And he had no idea where she was. Her chambers were empty. The bed had not been slept in. Her few belongings were gone, and one of her old traveling dresses was missing from the wardrobe. For a terrible moment, Kalen thought she had left him, that the poison Lady Marin had spread had finally driven her away. Then he saw the note on her pillow. His hands shook as he unfolded it. The words were short, barely more than a few lines, but they carved through his heart like a blade. I cannot let you choose between me and your kingdom. Please do not look for me. Forget I ever existed. Be the king your people need. Be happy. She had run. She had run to protect him because she thought she was not worth the fight. Kalen crumpled the note in his fist, and a roar of pure alpha fury tore from his throat. Find her! He grabbed the nearest guard and slammed him against the wall. Every soldier, every servant, every hound in this palace, find her now! The search spread through the castle like wildfire. Within minutes, guards were scouring every corridor, every room, every hidden passage. It was one of the stable boys who finally brought the news, pale-faced and trembling. The stables, Your Majesty. There was a struggle, blood on the floor, and one of the servants said she saw Lady Marin heading toward the old dungeons with a group of men she did not recognize. The dungeons, where prisoners awaited trial, where traitors awaited execution. Kalen shifted mid-stride. His wolf form was massive, black as midnight, with eyes that burned like molten gold. He tore through the palace, sending servants screaming out of his path, his claws gouging furrows in the stone floor. The bond pulled him forward, guiding him through the darkness, down stairs that spiraled into the bowels of the earth. He heard Lady Marin's voice before he saw her. "The king will be here soon. Make sure the evidence is in place. When he arrives, he needs to see exactly what his precious village girl truly is." Kaelin burst through the dungeon door like a storm made flesh. Lady Marin spun around, her face going white with shock. Her mercenaries scrambled for their weapons, but they were too slow. Kaelin was among them before they could draw their blades, his massive jaws closing around throats and limbs, his claws tearing through flesh like paper. He did not kill them. He wanted them alive to face justice. But by the time he was finished, none of them would ever walk again. Lady Marin backed against the wall, her composure finally shattered. "Your Majesty, please, this is not what it looks like. The girl attacked me. She tried to steal from the treasury. I was only protecting—" Kaelin shifted back to his human form. He stood before her naked and blood-splattered, his golden eyes blazing with a fury that made her words die in her throat. "Where is she?" His voice was barely human. "I do not know what you—" He slammed his hand against the wall beside her head, cracking the stone. "Where is she?" Lady Marin's mask crumbled completely. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her perfect makeup, revealing the desperate, jealous woman beneath. "The far cell," she whispered, "but she is nothing, Your Majesty. She is beneath you. I was trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life." Kaelin leaned in close, his lips brushing her ear. "The only mistake I made was not seeing the viper in my own court." He straightened and gestured to the guards who had followed him down. "Take her. She will stand trial for conspiracy against the crown, attempted murder, and treason." He did not wait to watch them drag her away. The far cell was dark and damp, and Sarah lay crumpled on the floor like a broken doll. Blood matted her hair where they had struck her. Her wrists were raw from the chains that bound her to the wall. She was barely conscious, her breath shallow, her skin pale as death. Kaelin fell to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he cupped her face. "Sarah, Sarah, look at me. Please." Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she did not seem to recognize him. Then something like wonder crossed her battered face. "You came," she whispered. "I will always come for you." He pressed his forehead to hers, tears burning in his eyes. "Always. Do you hear me? There is no kingdom, no crown, no throne worth having if you are not beside me." Sarah's hand came up to touch his cheek, weak and trembling. "I thought I was protecting you," she breathed. "I thought leaving would save you." "You are what saves me." He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, the tears that spilled down her cheeks. "You are everything, and I am never letting you go again." The healers worked through the night. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of gentle hands and soothing voices, and the constant warmth of Kaelin beside her. He refused to leave her bedside, even when his advisors begged him to rest, even when the council demanded his presence. He held her hand through every treatment, every bandage change, every moment of pain. And when she finally woke, truly woke, on the third morning, his face was the first thing she saw. "You look terrible," she croaked. Kaelin laughed, a broken sound that was half sob. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his clothes wrinkled and stained. He looked like he had not slept in days. He looked like a man who had been torn apart by fear and stitched back together by relief. "You almost died," he said hoarsely. "I think I am entitled to look a little rough." Sarah reached up and touched his face, tracing the dark circles under his eyes. "You should have rested. The kingdom needs its king." "The kingdom can wait." He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "You are more important." She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that she was not more important than an entire realm, that he could not keep putting her first when so many people depended on him. But the look in his golden eyes stole the words from her throat. He meant it. He truly, genuinely meant it. "Lady Marin," she said instead, "what happened to her?" Kaelin's expression hardened. "She confessed to everything. The lies about your parents, the mercenaries, the frame-up. She has been stripped of her titles and lands, and she will spend the rest of her life in exile beyond the northern borders." He paused, and something dark flickered in his eyes. "She is lucky I did not execute her on the spot. The only thing that stopped me was knowing you would not want me to become a monster on your behalf." Sarah's heart clenched. Even in his rage, he had thought of her. Even when vengeance was within his grasp, he had held himself back because he knew what kind of man she needed him to be. "I love you," she whispered. The words slipped out before she could stop them, raw and honest and terrifying. She had never said them before. She had never allowed herself to feel them before. But lying in that bed, looking at the man who had torn through an army to save her, she could not hold them back any longer. Kaelin stared at her. For a moment, he did not move, did not breathe. Then he surged forward and kissed her, deep and desperate and full of everything he could not put into words. "I love you too," he murmured against her lips. "I have loved you since the moment you stepped in front of that whip. I will love you until the day I die, and every day after that." Sarah laughed through her tears, clinging to him like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, breathing each other in. When Kaelin finally pulled back, there was something different in his expression, something nervous and hopeful and almost shy. "There is something I need to ask you," he said, "and I need you to know that whatever you answer, I will respect it. But I cannot wait any longer." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. When he opened it, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The ring inside was simple, but beautiful. A band of gold set with a single moonstone that seemed to glow from within, shifting colors in the morning light. It was not the ostentatious jewel she might have expected from a king. It was something softer, something meant for her. Kaelin took her hand, and she realized with a start that he was trembling. "Sarah," he said quietly, "you walked into my life when I had given up on finding anyone who could see past the crown. You took a punishment meant for me without knowing who I was. You stayed when anyone else would have run. You make me want to be better, to be worthy, to be the man you believe I can be." He swallowed hard, his golden eyes bright with emotion. "I do not care what the council thinks. I do not care what the nobles whisper. I want you beside me, today, tomorrow, forever." He slid the ring onto her finger, his hands still shaking. "Will you marry me? Will you be my queen?" Sarah looked at the ring on her finger. She looked at the king kneeling beside her bed, his heart in his eyes, his soul in his hands. She thought about the village girl who had stepped forward to save a stranger, never imagining that single act of kindness would lead her here. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." Kaelin's face split into a smile so bright it could have lit the entire kingdom. He gathered her into his arms and held her close, and Sarah buried her face in his chest and let herself believe, finally, that she deserved this, that she deserved him. Outside the window, the sun rose over the capital, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. A new dawn was beginning. 1 year later, the kingdom gathered to celebrate its queen. The coronation ceremony was unlike anything the realm had ever seen. Nobles and commoners stood side by side in the great hall, united in their love for the woman who had captured their king's heart. Sarah walked down the aisle in a gown of white and gold, her head held high, her scars hidden beneath silk, but no longer a source of shame. They were proof of her courage, proof of the sacrifice that had brought her to this moment. Kaelin waited for her at the altar, his golden eyes shining with pride and love so fierce it took her breath away. When he placed the crown upon her head, the crowd erupted in cheers that shook the very stones of the palace. "Long live Queen Sarah!" they cried. "Long live the Alpha King!" That night, after the feasting and the dancing and the endless stream of well-wishers, Kaelin led her to the tower balcony where he had first shown her his kingdom. The moon hung full and heavy in the sky, bathing everything in silver light. "1 year ago, I was a stranger stealing bread in a village square," he said softly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "And you stepped forward to save me without knowing who I was or what it would cost you." Sarah leaned back into his warmth, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. She had not told him yet. She had been waiting for the right moment. "I would do it again," she said, "1,000 times over." "I know you would." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "That is what makes you extraordinary." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight dance across the kingdom below. Sarah thought about everything that had changed since that terrible day at the whipping post. The pain she had endured, the love she had found, the family she had built from nothing. "Kaelin," she said quietly, "there is something I need to tell you." He turned her in his arms, his brow furrowing with concern. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No." She smiled, tears pricking at her eyes. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is perfect." She took his hand and pressed it against her stomach. "We are going to have a pup." Kaelin went completely still. His golden eyes widened, flickering down to where his hand rested, then back up to her face. For a long moment, he did not speak. Then a sound escaped him, something between a laugh and a sob, and he swept her into his arms and spun her around until she was dizzy with joy. "A pup," he breathed against her hair. "Our pup. Sarah, I—" His voice broke. "I never thought I would have this. A mate who loves me, a child of my own, a future worth living for." "You have all of it," she promised. "You have everything." He kissed her then, deep and tender, under the light of the full moon. And as he held her close, something stirred in Sarah's chest. A warmth she had felt before but never understood. Her wolf, dormant for so long, finally rising to the surface. She gasped as the shift took her, painless and natural, her body flowing into a new form like water finding its path. When she opened her eyes, she stood on 4 legs, her fur the color of moonlight, her senses exploding with 1,000 new sensations. Kaelin shifted beside her, his massive black wolf nuzzling against her silver one. Through the bond, she felt his joy, his pride, his overwhelming love. They ran together through the palace gardens, 2 wolves under the moonlight, mates in every sense of the word. And as the wind rushed through her fur and her paws pounded against the earth, Sarah finally understood what it meant to be whole. She had spent her entire life believing she was broken, worthless, invisible. But she had never been any of those things. She had simply been waiting for the moment when she would finally be seen.